All right, let's talk about Amazon Cognito Federated Identities. We're going to spend the next few minutes breaking down what can feel like a super dense technical document into something you can actually use. Okay, picture this. You're building an app, and of course, you need people to be able to log in, but not just from one place, from all the places. How do you even start to tackle that without losing your mind? Yeah, it's a mess, right? You've got people wanting to use their Facebook login, their Google login. Then you have corporate clients who need to use their enterprise systems, through stuff like SAML. And on top of all that, you might have your own username and password system. Trying to juggle all those different authentication tokens, it's a total headache. And when you try to roll this yourself, oh man, the code gets so tangled so fast. Suddenly, you're responsible for handling all these super sensitive tokens from all these different providers. That is a massive security risk if you get anything wrong. And for your users, it's just a clunky, disjointed experience. They might even end up with multiple accounts for the exact same service. Not good. This is where AWS steps in and basically asks the perfect question. What if? What if you could just hand off that entire tangled mess to one single secure hub that manages all your user identities for you? And that hub, my friends, is Amazon Cognito Federated Identities. Let's break it down. It does two really critical things. First, it gives every single user one consistent ID, no matter how they decide to log in. And second, and this is the magic part, it hands out temporary, limited privilege credentials. This lets your app securely talk to other AWS services without exposing long-term keys. So how does this actually work? Well, it all kicks off with this core concept called an identity pool. You can really think of this as the foundation for your whole identity setup. So, an identity pool, think of it like the main container for your app's users. It's this bucket of user identity information that lives inside your AWS account. Now, it's not storing passwords or user profiles or anything like that. Instead, it just knows about all the users who access your app and, importantly, which providers they're using to sign in. The actual API call to do this is create identity pool. And look, while there are a bunch of little details you can configure, it really just boils down to three main decisions. First, you give your pool a unique name. Simple enough. Second, you tell it which login providers you're going to trust. Google, Facebook, whatever. And third, you decide whether or not you'll let people in as guests without logging in at all. Okay, so we've got our container, the identity pool. Now let's talk about what actually goes inside it. We need to talk about the individual user identity. And this is where it gets really clever. Every single person who uses your app, whether they log in with Google or just browse around as a guest, they get assigned this stable, unique identifier. It's called an IdentityId. And that ID becomes the one single source of truth for that user across your entire AWS environment. This all happens with a call to the getID API. And what's so powerful about this, as the docs point out, is that if a user signs in with Google one day and then comes back and signs in with Facebook the next, Cognito is smart enough to implicitly link those logins. It recognizes, hey, this is the same person, and keeps them under that one consistent identity ID. It creates this totally seamless experience for them. This really breaks down the two fundamental types of users you're going to have in your pool. On one side, you have authenticated users. These are people who have logged in. They get permissions from what's called an authenticated role, which might let them, say, access their own private data. On the other side, you have the unauthenticated guests. They get a whole separate, much more restricted set of permissions, which is perfect for letting them browse public content without having to create an account. All right, quick recap. We have our container, the identity pool. We have a unique identity ID for our user. Now, let's get to the really good part, the payoff. Turning that ID into secure temporary access. See that identity ID? It's super useful, for sure, but it's really just a stepping stone. Its true value is that it acts like a ticket. It's a ticket you can trade in for something way more powerful. Secure, temporary access to all your AWS resources. And this right here, this is the climax of the whole flow. Your application takes that identity ID it got earlier and makes a call to get credentials for identity. Cognito then takes that ID and swaps it for a fresh set of temporary AWS credentials. And these credentials are scoped specifically to that user's role, whether they're authenticated or just a guest. And what do you get back? Well, it's basically a little treasure chest of credentials. You get an access key, a secret key, and a session token. But here's the most important part. They all expire. These are not permanent keys you have to worry about forever, which is just a massive security win for your application. Huge. Okay, let's zoom out for a second. We've walked through the whole flow, from a user logging in to getting those temporary credentials. But so what? Why does this really matter? What's the big picture here for you, the developer? When it comes down to it, Cognito solves 4 massive problems for you. 1. You get a single unified user identity, which makes your code so much simpler. 2. You can stop hard-coding long-term AWS keys into your app, which you should never ever do anyway. 3. You get to offload all that complex, messy token validation stuff directly to AWS. And 4. You can easily enforce the principle of least privilege, giving users only the permissions they need for only as long as they need them. And that really brings us to the end. The biggest takeaway here is this fundamental shift in thinking, moving away from permanent, static keys and toward dynamic, temporary credentials. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. How could embracing this model, this idea of vending temporary credentials on the fly, fundamentally change the security and the architecture of the next application you build?